reason can be ineffectual and sterile. So science is a form of rational inquiry in which you take yourself out of your limited self, your limited prejudices, because you get involved with the world outside individual beings, individual views, which transcends, in a sense, human prejudice, human frailties, human traditions in some sense, and deals with a world, so-called objective reality, which goes outside one's subjective views and prejudices.
Thank you. We had a discussion in the planetarium yesterday about the greenhouse effect, and just to remind the class about this discussion, we had one party that said the greenhouse effect is probably, or I don't remember the exact words, but he said scientists pretty much know that these warming trends have gone on, and cooling trends have gone on, and it's insignificant. And another party said quite the opposite, that it's very significant, that we could be destroying our planet. And you made some comments as regards to that situation, and which a number of people found very perceptive and very, very true, you might say. And I was just wondering, Professor Devons, if you could reiterate those comments.
If I can remember them, but I think what I said then was what I feel now, is that these problems like global ecological problems, greenhouse effects, depletion of ozone, all these things, they're certainly not pure fantasy. We know that human beings can very drastically, in a comparatively short time, make the world uninhabitable. I think I said certainly if all the piled up atomic explosives were to go off in a short time, that would probably happen. There's nothing fantastic. However, there are many media, popular media, press and television and so on, which look for the spectacular, look for the sensational, and therefore pay little respect to the reality of the problems, their dimensions, simply want to dwell on the sensational side. And in reaction to that, there's a tendency for others to say it's all sensation. Well, it isn't all sensation any more than the old fable of crying wolf was all sensation. Many times it was just crying wolf, and then the real wolf came along. So one can't dismiss these things. They are real. Exactly their dimensions we don't know, but they're significant enough, and this is where science enters. Scientific examination of these social phenomena tells us enough to say that we ought to be concerned, we ought to examine them more thoroughly, and we ought to be prepared, because if we don't examine them, we find they turn out to be very serious. There may be a point of no return. We may get into a situation in which we can't undo the damage that's done. We may leave a world, children and grandchildren, which is uninhabitable. We don't know. So we have to explore these things, just like science. In many ways, science through technology produces these effects. It has the responsibility and need to try and find out as best it can what the implications are, and to keep a balanced mind as far as possible about these things. And that science enters in another way, and that's why we teach science. That's why I think we have to teach science in our schools. But since these effects could concern everyone, people have to have a balanced view about them, not an irrational or prejudicial view. And a background of understanding of science, knowing how scientific results come about, how limited they are, how they can change. All this feeling about the nature of science is to some degree essential if an individual is going to take a view about the seriousness and the significance of these problems. Of course, any individual is going to largely judge them on what they feel to be the integrity and the validity of the status of the individual investigators, the prestige of this committee or that body of scientists. But in assessing that, assessing who they can trust and who they can trust, as well as what they can trust and what they can't trust. Some feeling for what science is all about. It's not some black magic. Some feeling for its possibilities and its limitations are essential if one's going to do this intelligently with any sense of security at all. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and you also said something to the effect of the science teacher's job is to discriminate, or excuse me, the science teacher's job is to teach their students to discriminate between what is truth and what is error.
Well, that's a big tall order, because absolute truth and even absolute error, well, errors, you can more often say something is quite obviously wrong than you can say something is absolutely right. They have to know that even the most profound truths are, in a certain sense, have limits to them. Nevertheless, within the domain where science is successful, it's not difficult to say this is just hocus pocus, and this is a genuine answer to a question, the result of serious scientific inquiry, a serious inquiry. I don't have to use the word scientific over and over again. Serious, honest inquiry. There's a certain integrity. This is some ballyhoo, this is propaganda, this is somebody trying to make a quick reputation. Some sense of discrimination. That's the sense of discrimination. What is honest, what is truthful, what carries integrity, what is meaningful, and what is just propaganda and balderdash. They're the two extremes. Practicing education in science in the sense of practicing it can give one a feeling for that sort of discrimination. I think that's perhaps the most important contribution that science and the general public can make to the broad education.
Thank you.
Amen.
And thank you.
Fair enough.
Anything else to say about the class, or you
Well,
want to say anything to the teachers?
it's always a
specifically?
challenge. It's always a challenge, and teachers often get very disappointed when they come to a class like this, 10, 15 days, and they expect all problems to disappear. And I keep on repeating them that some of the problems, so simple, took the human race hundreds, thousands of years even to grasp, to grapple with, to understand, resolve. And even with all the background knowledge that goes before them, you shouldn't be surprised they don't get the answers so quickly. As a rule, not always, but as a rule, people get quick answers to problems, to fairly deep problems. It really means they haven't got answers at all. They're just willing to settle without an answer. So I've found full, deep answers to problems, meaningful answers, carry on a long way. Usually takes some time to percolate into one's consciousness. And not only just to percolate, you have to do work with the thing, use your hands, your brain, your eyes. There's no quick route, there are no quickies. Science is not a subject of instant gratification. Sometimes it takes quite a time. When the gratification does come, the understanding, it's a really good, you get a full rewarding at the end.
I was just wondering if in closing, maybe you'd like to reiterate the metaphor, I think it's a metaphor, of the ant and the